Be really clear about what it is exactly that they receive, and then be clear around limitations on communications. I always say that boundaries is my favorite B word. You, one, want to make sure you're getting paid sooner rather than later. And two, don't want to be having to spend money on lawyers and having a whole drawn out legal fight with a client. Don't hide stuff in the fine print. If there's a policy you want somebody to know, respect, and abide by, put it in bold.
Yasmine, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Liv.
You are what every new coach and maybe current coach needs right now. I have to tell you, we get so many questions about legalities when it comes to starting and running a coaching business, and I can't give them advice. So I'm so glad you're here to answer some of our questions and also tell us the most important thing, which I think is really what needs to go in a strong life coaching or coaching business contract.
I love that you say that, because that is what I've been telling people for years that work with other professionals when it comes to being asked. And even life coaches sometimes might find themselves facing situations where their clients are seeking legal information or legal advice, And so I love that your, instinct is, okay, I can't give you that legal advice. Let me help you find someone who is qualified, is licensed, and can actually provide that support. So I'm very happy to be here, and I'm happy to talk about protecting ourselves legally, having a business, a coaching business, where you work with clients and can reduce the likelihood of liability on your end, and also do right by your client in protecting them from suffering any sort of harm or, there are a couple of other things that I'm sure we'll get into as far as steps that you can take as a life coach and as a coaching professional to just reduce the overall risk in your business.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting is we get a lot of people going through coaching or interested in coaching that just kind of they're like, I just want to dabble in it. Like, I want to test it out a little bit, and often do so without any type of contract. And I would personally say that's probably the number one legal mistake a new coach can make. But I would love to hear from you. What do you think is the biggest mistakes that you see? I mean, you run a company called Coaches and Company, so I know you see a lot, but what is one of the biggest mistakes?
Yeah, I would say you nailed it in terms of one of the biggest mistakes is going into a coaching relationship and working with a client and engaging in what is essentially a business transaction at the end of the day without having the terms of that transaction in writing. So if you are offering somebody coaching services, whether they are an individual or maybe they are a company, having the terms of what services you're agreeing to provide to them and what they are agreeing to pay you in exchange or provide you in exchange for those services. And then different policies that relate to the coaching relationship, as well as, disclaimers, being clear around what the limitation around your coaching is, because you're working with people as a coach, right? And people are very complex. We are beautiful creatures, but we are very, very complex. And we have a whole, spiritual side to us, mental side to us, physical side to us. And all of those are parts of our lives. And when you are supporting people in their life as a life coach, you're going to inevitably come across issues related to their health, whether it's their mental health or their physical health. And it's important for you to be clear with them and for them to be clear as to what the limitations are around your services, and not to, rely on, for example, legal advice or financial advice or medical advice, and that this is not a replacement for mental health therapy or, the support of a medical professional, for example. So yeah, it's not having the terms of all of that in writing and being really clear as to what the scope of the services are and what the scope of your liability is and what exactly you are agreeing to provide them. So general quote, life coaching services versus, how many specific sessions over a course of how long is the contract, et cetera. You're in a much better position, as a business and individually as somebody who's involved in the day-to-day of working with your clients. You're in a much better position when everything is specific and in writing.
Yes.
And everybody can, reference it as needed.
I have told some of our students this before, and hopefully it's not in bad form, but I've often said, you want to keep the contract really, really tight. And they're like, but what if, but what if? And I'm like, I keep my contracts super tight. Now, I've had the
For
same
sure.
one-on-one coaching contract for about 10 years now. So maybe I ought to have
Nice.
you give a new,
Might be time for an upgrade.
it might be time for an
Maybe.
upgrade. But one of the things I have is a very strict cancellation policy or late policy or no show. Now I'm a human and we work with a lot of women and a lot of moms. So I also have a heart. So if someone cancels, 4 hours early or late because their kid is homesick, I can still offer to reschedule that. But I keep those, certain terms of my contract really, really strict and clear to have me covered should it become a recurring issue. But now, is that considered me breaking my own contract by allowing that? Or is that?
That is very interesting. I love it because this is actually exactly what I recommend other people to do is give yourself the option of exercising these policies. And then you have the discretion to, maybe not apply the rescheduling fee, for example, or not apply a policy around whether or not they're able to reschedule at all, or whether there's a late fee for any late payments. If they're making regular payments to you, you get to decide and you'll have the discretion to, apply that late fee if you want to, or if you don't. But it's not, I wouldn't say it's breaking your own contract. It is, just exercising your own discretion as the business owner. And you gave yourself that option. When you don't have the policy in your contract at all, you are not providing yourself that option at all. You're taking it off the table. But if it's in the contract, you could consider that as an option to exercise, or you might decide, as you said, okay, let me, fully recognize that who I'm working with here is a person and I know them, or maybe I don't know them, but this isn't something that is recurring or that I'm finding, has become a problem. Instead, maybe this is the first time something like this has happened. So let me go ahead and, extend them some grace, which I think is the right thing to do in many instances, personally and professionally.
Yeah. So I want to get into some of these non-negotiables, things that must go into every coach's, despite their niche, what must go into their contracts. And I know if you're watching on YouTube, check the notes below. We are going to give you some freebies from Yasmine. And then if you're on one of the podcasting, just find the show notes. We have linked everything there so you can follow along with this. And she has a beautiful legally launched checklist, right? For new coaches. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you can follow along there, but just tell us, what are the must-haves for a coaching contract?
Yeah, I would say, so the list I'll share, I'll name a few things to make sure you have in your contract, but of course it's not, an exhaustive list or anything. But for sure you want to be, like I said, you want to be specific about what the scope of the services are. So what are you actually providing? Coaching services for 8 weeks. Okay. So does that mean they meet with you, they have access to you and can get on your calendar once a week, twice a week, anytime throughout the week? Some people offer, I wonder, I'd be curious. Oh my gosh, there are so many things I want to talk to you about actually, Liv, because I feel like
we might need a part two.
Yeah, we might need a part two. But, there are different types of services that you can provide and that I see being provided within coaching, whether it is a live in-person or virtual session where you're meeting with the client in real time. And then there are some asynchronous options through, for example, software like Voxer. Have you seen that or heard that?
Yep.
Yes. And so, Voxer is not the only, if you aren't familiar, if you listen to this and you're not familiar, it's a walkie-talkie type app where you can send voice notes back and forth. A lot of people love it. And so it could be through that or something like Slack or some other type of messaging tool. But being really clear as to what are the limitations around your communication as it relates to that scope of services. So if they get access to, if it is an asynchronous tool like this, or maybe it is weekly sessions or biweekly or whatever the package looks like, be really clear about what it is exactly that they receive, and then be clear around limitations on communications. I always say that boundaries is my favorite B word. You have to have those boundaries in place with your clients. It supports everybody.
Just in our community, very recently, a couple days ago, someone was asking about a client who just texts them all the time. And I said, in my contract, I have a clause around texting saying texting will be, replied to a reasonable amount between Monday and Thursday, 9 a.m. and 4. It's very, very specific. Now I can always respond outside of those hours if I want to, but I don't guarantee any of that in my
Yeah,
coaching
for sure.
contract.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And guarantees are, I think, such an important and overlooked part of the relationship, whether it comes to the results that they can receive or
Oh,
the service and access that they can receive
yes.
as somebody who's working with you. And so you give yourself again the discretion to decide, okay, like they I'm only legally bound under this contract to where they can expect to hear from me within these hours, or you can say, like, within 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, whatever makes sense in the context. Everybody, there's no one right answer here. Or, maybe it is the week of receiving the communication, but being really clear so that you could decide, okay, I do want to reply. I find myself with some time Saturday morning and I didn't get to respond to my clients who, sent messages yesterday afternoon. Let me reply. And that may or may not be. And I think some people might say, okay, maybe that's not the best practice, but they're not expecting you to answer on a Saturday, and they're not thinking that you are in breach of the contract because you haven't replied to their messages from, for example, Thursday or Friday. So just as an example.
And I don't give legal advice, I promise, but I have told some of our students before that they need to, instead of dabbling or not having a contract or having a really loose contract, you want to set your business up like you already have a full coaching practice. Like if you have those 10 to 12 clients that you want, which is typically like someone's, goal within the first year of their business, you need to create your contracts, your schedule, and your boundaries around that. Because if you do, and I learned this from experience, have a client who really needs a lot of extra, you don't ever set boundaries with them. They're texting you, calling you all times outside of your contract. That's going to honestly drain your energy so fast. And I've
Yeah.
been
Oh
through
my
that before.
gosh. You're going to wish that you weren't working with that client anymore. And that's
I know.
worst case scenario when
Right.
you're working with a client.
Right. I also feel like
Yeah.
when you set those boundaries straight away, it develops a much more professional relationship straight away, which I do believe in coaching is the most powerful container, if you will, to actually get results. And like I think you know this, we align ourselves very closely to the International Coach Federation or ICF, and all of our programs are accredited by them. And we also encourage our students to put the ICF code of ethics into their contracts as a one page saying, sign that you've read this. And that really outlines the part you were talking about what coaching is and what coaching isn't. Like I cannot talk to you about, your diagnoses or whatever and under the mental health umbrella, but here's what we can talk about in coaching. And I think that kind of information can be really helpful in that scope of services section, if you will.
I really love that. I hadn't considered the ICF code of ethics being included in the contract, but I'm going to take a closer look at them and see, how we could work that in, because I really like that. I think that, you also said something totally spot on around, whenever you start the relationship from a professional place and you present the contract and it lays out these policies for the client to really understand what they can expect. I've found in working with my clients and different customers within my company is that their clients feel more confident when they
Yes.
see almost a roadmap laid out that clearly specifies what the limitations of the relationship is and what services they can expect and the level of service and the policies that they should bear in mind as they navigate the relationship during the term of the contract, as opposed to not having that in writing. The contract is sort of, your work together is open-ended. It doesn't really have any parameters. You don't really know when it's going to end. It's not totally clear to what extent they have access to you and the services you provide. It's just a messy situation you don't want to be involved in when it's not in writing. So yeah, I think that having the relationship in writing is definitely the way to go. It's in everybody's best interest.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm just like inner laughing right now because I'm like, gosh, this should apply really well to like any relationship. Like, can you sign this that you're not going to blow up my phone? No, I'm just kidding. Like,
Yes,
should I put this on my
exactly.
dating profile? Like, I have terms of engagement. I'm just
Literally.
kidding. But okay,
Do
so
not
we have to
proceed
have
unless you agree with these terms.
exactly. I guess we would call it like a prenup in some situation. Okay. So we need to have a scope of services. What
Yes.
else?
So we mentioned the communications policy and being really clear as to when they can expect to hear from you, through what channels. So are you accessible via text? Is it via email? Is it through a specific software like Slack or Voxer? Be really clear about that. And then you, of course, want to address what it is that they are going to be paying you. What is the compensation? What is actually being exchanged? So you are providing the service in exchange for, of course, payment. And so there are different policies around payment that you want to outline, specifically how much is the total package? Is there a payment plan that's being offered, or are they paying it on a monthly basis throughout the term of the contract if the contract is longer than a month long? Be really clear as to what that schedule looks like. What constitutes a late payment? When is payment due if it is over an extended period of time? I am not a big fan of really drawn out payment plans, just because I have seen, with clients that the longer the payment plan, the higher the likelihood that it can, result in a default where they're not paying. I'm sure you've seen your fair share of that.
I've seen my fair share. And, my sales team, our training director, they're always like, Olivia, stop approving. I am the softest. I shouldn't be saying this. I'm the
I know.
softest, but I agree. They
I
do. I
know.
mean, they
I
tend to
know.
default the longer the plan. And, we are a big stand for accessibility as much as
For
possible. So we
sure.
do love a
Yeah.
good payment plan. I will say it has been revised over the years, though, adding in a more, I don't want to say strict, but like more clear, communication around late payments and more clear around late payment fees, which we never used to have before, but unfortunately we have had to implement now. And, I guess it's par for the course, but I would say that that's definitely something you would probably consider if you are extending a payment plan, especially if the payment plan extends beyond the service.
Oh, absolutely. You never want the payment plan to extend beyond the service, ideally. I would say, I know. It's hard. And I hear you. Like, I love a good payment plan too. I love offering a payment plan. And I think that it goes so far in terms of accessibility. It really makes services more accessible to more people. However, my rule of thumb is less than 3 months. Like, it should be 3 payments. I don't think it should go beyond 3 payments. I think that's, personally, that's a best practice I would recommend. But, I know that every circumstance, every service, every business, every industry, every type of client is different. So there's really no, hardline rule of thumb. But I would say 3 payments is a lower likelihood of you having to, it's not a fun situation either, having to chase a
No,
payment
it's not.
or,
And yeah.
yeah. That's not a
Yeah, we're
situation
not
you want to
collections
be in.
agencies, we're coaches. So I think that's, again, it's one of those things I feel like is up to discretion to a degree, because it also goes into the conversation around equity. So if I'm to say like, oh, but I feel bad for this person, so I'm going to just let them do whatever for a few months. And then I hold the other person to the contract. So that's something we've really, and I'm telling you, they have had to dial me in because I'm a SAP. Don't email me about your payment because I'm probably going to say it's okay. I can't even touch the billing email anymore. But like, we have to, from an equitable standpoint, hold everyone to the same terms in a company like ours, where, we can't just let one person get away with a late payment and not the other.
For sure. Yeah, I agree. And, I think that there's something to be said about communicating that to your clients up front and letting them know. I think, I hear you on being a SAP when it comes to it. I also like, if I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't. I feel like I've said this actually publicly before, that I will give a refund, like, no problem. Like, honestly, and my line of work is in digital products. So it's different than services. So I think it's a very different situation in services. It's not, there is significant expense in delivering service, right? So it's a different situation. But I am also like, if there's a late payment situation, I want to be flexible. I want to extend grace, but you said we're not collections agencies, we're coaches, but also we're not banks, we're coaches. And whenever you extend, you're essentially extending credit to the client. that I think is a good option to provide, and it can work from, a financial standpoint, from an accessibility standpoint, from a marketing standpoint. Like there are many potential benefits to offering that, but you want to communicate to your client upfront and be really explicit around the commitment that you are asking them to make. And there are other options to consider too, which this might be a little off track, but it's definitely related to this. I'm curious if y'all provide this, if IGC provides this to any of their students and clients, but third-party financing.
Yeah, we
So,
do.
okay, nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we offer that too. And so from a business standpoint, and if you're listening to this and you provide any coaching services, you are also a business. You have a business. And so these are options available to you where you can sign up for companies like, we use a company called Sezzle, but the other companies are Klarna, Afterpay. And these are companies that you can provide that as an option to your clients to essentially take out a line of credit from them or a loan from them, and you receive payment. And the agreement for payment is between the client and the financing company. You just want to be really transparent with the client around what it is that they're agreeing to, and also vet the company you work with really well, because some of these companies can also be predatory, where they have like outrageous interest rates after a first initial period of time, but their responsibility as a company is to communicate that to your client. So
Yeah.
just be upfront and communicate all of these things, put them in writing if that is the
Exactly.
case.
I think that's such a good point. Like even with our coach training agreements, which we now have individual agreements sent to every single student who enrolls, it does have different sections based on how they made their payment and the, rules or stipulations or what they agreed to. As well, like based on outside financing or Klarna, which we use, or an in-house payment plan and so forth. So I think everything you're saying is like just what I wish someone had told me when I started is be way more specific than you thought you needed to be.
100%. So we talked about payment, specifying, payment schedule, a late payment policy. When is a payment considered late and what happens if it's considered late? And then I would say you also want to make sure that you are including the necessary disclaimers around what are the limitations, like around your coaching services. Are you providing mental health services? Are you providing, dietitian or nutrition related services? Are you providing legal or financial services? Especially if I would say many coaches have some sort of other license. Maybe they are a licensed therapist or dietitian or financial planner or whatever that might look like for you. Make sure that you're really clear around, okay, is that world of yours also going to be provided to the client in the form of services, or is this exclusively coaching services? So that can help shield you from liability too. And yeah, that's one of the things that I think can easily be overlooked when you don't have something in writing.
Agree. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about is confidentiality. Like that's something, again, this is kind of an ICF thing too, that they require coaches to have in their contracts around confidentiality. And I'm asking you some questions, which are also based on some FAQs we've gotten from our students on this topic. And one of the things, and I just want to get your take on this, especially in coaching, is like coaching is not therapy. Even if you're a therapist, you can provide coaching without going into the therapy world, which I believe is how you have to do it anyway. But one of the things that comes up is around like a situation where perhaps the client is in distress, or you can't get a hold of them for a while, or you fear that they may be putting themselves in danger or someone else, and situations when you would break the confidentiality. So, do you know what I'm talking about? Like
yeah. Is that, you're saying the ICF has
so
some
the
statements
ICF
around
requires confidentiality, but then you can put in there like an emergency contact or, a manager if that's the case, like if it's internal coaching or something of that nature. But what is your stand on a confidentiality agreement and, invoking the ability to contact an emergency contact? Because the reality is in coaching, like you are dealing with people's lives. And sometimes they're not always going as you hoped they would.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you bring up. So I would say that from a legal standpoint, you can really include any terms in your contract that you wish that are suitable for the nature of the coaching as it relates to exceptions to confidentiality. So all of our contracts, for example, with under the Coaches and Company brand, all of our contract templates include a confidentiality clause that states that anything that is discussed within the scope of the relationship and within the term of this contract will not be shared publicly and will be maintained as far as confidentiality goes. You could include in your contract an exception around if there is, if I'm not able to get in contact with you, I can contact, this emergency contact. Or if I, for some reason, believe that, you could be at risk of harming yourself, I suppose you could include something like that. I don't know that somebody would sign that. In practice, I don't know how that would work. But from a legal standpoint, if you believe that this individual were harming themselves, I don't know that you have a legal obligation to do that, to report it, excuse me. I don't know that you do.
Yeah, I don't know that you do either unless you are already a mandated reporter, I believe, from another profession that you're in, which of course we have a lot of crossover with. There's a lot of therapists, there's a lot of social workers, there's a lot of nurses that come through coach training. And I don't want to say it's one of those gray areas, but those are definitely questions that we've got in terms of, what is our legal obligation to something like this? And I think the best workaround in partnership with a conversation with the ICF that we've had is requesting that someone give us an emergency contact. And actually, we've had no one not add one since we've implemented
Nice.
that. So,
Wow. Okay, great.
yeah. So,
Okay, that's wonderful.
yeah, so far, so good.
That's good
But
to hear.
okay, so you covered a lot. So we need the payment terms, we need the scope of services, we
Yeah.
need any liability disclaimers, confidentiality. Am I missing anything?
We talked about communication
Communication,
policies.
yes.
Yeah. I would say also something to make sure you include in your contract that a lot of people leave out is a jurisdiction. So what law applies to the contract? What jurisdictions, laws are we going to apply this under if there is a dispute? Yeah. So I remember years ago, I had a client that I worked with in my law practice, and we were going over their contract. It was actually a coaching contract that she was using with coaching clients. And I remember I was reviewing the contract as a part of our consultation, and I got to the end, and I had known her for a little while. So I was surprised when I saw that she had Singapore listed as her jurisdiction in the contract. And she was surprised too, because she hadn't realized that until I pointed it out. So she had just used a contract off the internet. She just found it online. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I know. And so what happens in that instance is that you're essentially agreeing the jurisdiction that is listed, the laws of that place are going to apply. And that is where you would have to travel to resolve any legal dispute in relationship to this contract.
Wow.
And so, yes, it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
So what you want to do as the coaching professional is state in your contract what jurisdiction that you wish to have apply. And for most people, that's going to be where they operate their business, where they live. And I look at it as something of a home court advantage, right? It's here where you are. You're likely working with clients that don't live in your city, or maybe not even in your state. They might be across the country or around the world. And so having your local jurisdiction means that if anybody were to try to pursue legal action against you, they would have to pursue that in your jurisdiction where you live and hire an attorney that's in your jurisdiction to pursue that legal action, which can sometimes act as something of a deterrent, which, that's something that you want to do to reduce that risk and likelihood of somebody pursuing legal action against you.
Yeah. So good. I never have heard of that. I'm need to go back and look at my contracts. I'm sure that's in there. I think. We did have ours created by lawyers almost a decade ago, but nevertheless, so they should be there. But That's super helpful. And if you're watching this, please leave a comment and let us know that that was so helpful, because we're probably all going to look back and be like, oh my God, I copied this off the internet and I need to go to a random country. So good. So like I mentioned too, go to the link below or in the show notes and get the Legally Launch checklist from Yasmine so you can look over your stuff. I know she has a lot more resources too, which we're going to link below if you need someone to look at your contract. But before we wrap up, I have a question from an FAQ from our students. What do you do if the contract gets broken? Like, how can you actually enforce it? So say a client doesn't pay, or they want a refund outside of the policy, or they just kind of ghost on the whole thing. What is the best legal way to handle that?
So if you find yourself in a situation where a client is in breach of the contract, your number one objective should be to resolve it as soon as possible through communication. That is the least expensive route. It's and least expensive in terms of money and time. So it's not you don't want for this to become a big problem where you are dealing with this 6 months from now, right? That's, in my opinion, one of the worst case scenarios for sure.
Right. So don't just let it go. Don't be weird and ignore the conversation is what you're saying.
That's one part of it. Yeah, that's one part of it.
Yeah.
And
some people are so afraid to enforce the contract. And no offense, I'm a woman, but sometimes it's us who are a little bit worse with this, where we're afraid we're going to upset someone, or we're being too annoying, or whatever the case may be. And then it's 30, 60 days have passed and you're out all this money or time or energy.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would agree with that for sure. Don't ignore it and just avoid the hard conversation. You've got to have the hard conversation sometimes. And the good thing is sometimes it can be via email in these instances. So you don't necessarily have to get on a call with them or meet them face to face to have this conversation. You can communicate with them via email. But I would also say, one option to avoid is ignoring it and letting it drag out, but also running to, the courthouse to file a lawsuit is also not the best option available, or the first option that you should,
right.
Consider hiring a lawyer and then have them send demands and file a lawsuit. That's also not in your best interest always, right? So your number one objective should be, how can I, from a professional place, approach this situation and communicate clearly with them and cite the contract as needed? What were the terms that we agreed to? And, essentially try to compel and negotiate your way to a resolution, because you find yourself facing a problem. You're in disagreement. Somebody's in breach. Yeah, you could hire a lawyer and have them just take care of it. And some businesses choose to go that path, and it's not right or wrong, right? It just depends on the circumstances of your situation. But if you're somebody who works with, a roster of 5 to 10 clients at any given point, you, one, want to make sure you're getting paid sooner rather than later. And two, don't want to be having to spend money on lawyers and having, a whole drawn out legal fight with a client. That's very draining from money, time, and energy.
Gives me anxiety thinking about having.
I know. Like I said, I think that might be worst case scenario. Yeah. And you're not getting paid. So that's a problem too.
Right. And especially if you've already done some of the services, or, I know when we sign up clients, we give them a lot of resources. So but you know what? I do believe having a really strong contract that is signed from the first session really does prevent a lot of this,
it does,
bad behavior, if you will. The stronger our contracts and agreements have gotten over the years, the less problems we have had. So last question before we go.
I want to say one more thing on that.
Yes.
Don't hide stuff in the fine print. If there's a policy you want somebody to know and respect and abide by, put it in bold. Don't hide it in the fine print.
Oh my God.
Okay, I'm with you. We're on the same page.
And why would you not?
Exactly.
We pull out the main terms of our terms and conditions and email them now to students so that they have not all the fine print legal jargon, but student payment policy, attendance policy, like just the key points. And again, that's something we've had to improve over the years. But the last question I have for you before we go, there's probably people listening to this who are feeling screwed right now. They're like, oh my God, I don't have any of this. What are a couple things that they can do today/this week that get them in a better place legally?
Don't sign another client without sitting down and taking a look at your contract. If you had a lawyer create that contract, that's great. Make sure the policies are all applicable. Make sure it is in alignment with how it is that you want to have your relationship set up with clients. If it is a contract that you sort of like, I like to say like you duct tape it together and it's like giving Frankenstein,
hodgepodge.
Yes. Like
little copy paste.
It's not, a little copy
or
paste
maybe
action.
you just asked ChatGPT and maybe it needs a little bit.
Yes.
That's my new business partner, but nevertheless, you still would want to check that.
I think of it as like my intern that's read the whole internet.
Yes.
But I still need to check everything they do and write.
Yes.
So, and I love that you brought that up, Tulip, because that is that is a very current thing that we have a very powerful tool available to us through ChatGPT or other AI tools. And yes, we can use them to draft contract clauses, but should we? That's the real question. Mm-hmm. And if you have one of those contracts that are, you've pieced it together with different clauses, maybe over the years you've found, clauses in different coaches you've worked with or that you found on Google or in a Facebook group or whatever, take that to a lawyer that specializes in working with coaches and service-based professionals and ask them to review as someone in your jurisdiction. Or you can have an industry-specific contract template that is designed for coaching services.
And that's what you have, right?
And that's what we have at Coaches and Company.
I was like, can't we just come to you? Okay.
Yes. Because what you find is it's hard to find a lawyer that understands the nature of coaching and working with clients and selling services online.
Yeah.
And being able to actually create a contract that supports the nature of this relationship. Like I've had clients and friends who have worked with lawyers in their jurisdictions. And of course we have, just in the US alone, we have 50 jurisdictions. And so, it's a little hard to find a qualified lawyer that is licensed and that has experience and understanding of the nature of coaching relationships. And so our contract templates are designed for coaching relationships, selling one-to-one coaching, group coaching, if you have an online course or some sort of digital product, or if you host online workshops or in-person workshops. There are a lot of different, as you and I both know, a lot of different ways that coaches can work with their clients and can deliver value to people that they can help. We've got all the terms and conditions and contracts available for people to be able to instantly download and customize in minutes, and they're lawyer created and approved. And I didn't mean to end this with a plug on my product, but I'm very proud.
I did. Don't come to me and ask. Go to Yasmine. There's links everywhere. There's free stuff so you can check her out. Her Instagram is on there, Coaches and Company.
Thank you.
Go to all of it. I think you're the perfect person who is legal, ethical, and obviously really wonderful to talk to. So this has been super helpful. And now we have something to refer our students to. So I'm especially grateful for that.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah. And so like I said, if you were listening to this and you don't have this in place, don't panic, just go start with Yasmine's free tools. And then she also has things that you can purchase, or get your contract reviewed. Even if you've been using, this speaking to me, even if you've been using the same contract for 10 years, I learned something new today and I'm going to go look at our contracts for that too. So with that being said, I'm glad you plugged yourself. You saved me a little bit, but thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. We'll talk to you soon.